And we're going on to our second presentation by Anne Mutahi. Like I said earlier, another way in which feminists have engaged with the economy critically is to look at microfinance as a way towards to get economic empowerment. So on the one hand, we have a problem with the way the economy is structured. Why are we relying so heavily on cash? Why is it large multinational organizations benefiting? Why is there always a profit motive? What about a community, collaborative, benevolent approach? Is it always about capital? Or can it be about other forms of empowerment that are about a collective, building a collective capacity to be self-sufficient? And microfinance is one of those ways in which feminists have said, okay, we'll work with this economy, but this is how we're going to work with it. Not necessarily about individual gain, as it is about groups of women working together in order to gain access to this capital cash economy by working with the banking system. Sometimes microfinance works with banking systems, and sometimes they prefer to work outside banking systems and create their own kind of banking, or their own kind of financial, fiscal, if you can put it that way. These are the words that banks use, fiscal management system. So I'm very happy that we have Anne Mutahi, because Anne Mutahi has experience, as I can see from her profile, with the banking system. And she's currently a chairperson with the Standard Chartered Bank in Kenya. She's been on their board since February 2009. In November 2012, she was appointed acting chairperson following the resignation of Wilfred Kiboro, and was subsequently confirmed as chairperson of the board in May 2013. So Anne, you can tell us your latest bio, but that is what I have in front of me. And I also have read that you have been involved in microfinance projects involving women, and you've been a chief executive officer of Chipegemi Trust Limited, a wholesale microfinance institution where you served until December 2008, and then you left to found Sokoletu Limited, which manages a trader market in Nairobi's Central Business District. So I'm really excited to hear your input on microfinance as a route to both women's economic empowerment, but also as a route to challenging the way in which patriarchal constructs of the economy are currently managed by banking systems and macroeconomic ways of thinking about profits. Microfinance seems to offer some alternatives. So, Anne?
Well, I think I'd just like to begin by thanking you, Yeliwe, for your introduction, and also the Heinrich Ball Foundation for raising this very important issue of women and the economy. I think I'd like to just start by setting a context, and just to say that in Africa, and I know in Kenya in particular, one of the goals that we are all fighting for is actually the development of our countries. And when I talk about development here, I'm not just talking about it from the point of view of how much money are we getting, but also from the fact we want better health, we want better education, we want better housing, and all the other areas that actually constitute development. Now, what has become recognized is that that development, which we all aspire to, will never become a reality until women are recognized as equal partners in development. Not where they are now, where they're seen as maybe, as you mentioned, the domestic workers, or where they're the unpaid workers in our agricultural system, but actually as equal development partners. The other point that I'd like to just raise is the elephant in the room, and that is poverty. We live in a continent, we live in a country where poverty predominates everything. And therefore, when you're really looking at poverty, again, it means that you're lacking in education, you're lacking in all the areas that I talked about that we actually want. And the reality is that in Africa, poverty wears the woman's face. It's a woman who very often is poorly educated, has very poor health. We talked about yesterday when we talked about the high mortality rate. She's the one who, in areas of conflict, she's the one who bears a brunt. She's usually poorly malnutritioned. She doesn't eat well. And of course, in terms of opportunities, she's the one who gets to hear them last. So therefore, when we really talk about development, I think the question that we probably want to try and answer is, number one, why is a woman poor? And two, how can we ensure that a woman becomes an equal partner in development so that our countries can actually reach where we aspire to? And when I look at that, I take a lot of encouragement from countries in the Far East which have developed at a higher level than ourselves. And they realize that unless they empower their women properly, that they will never actually reach there. Having said that, and setting that macro level, maybe we can just maybe go to a micro level and look at a village situation and ask ourselves, if you look at our average villages, and in my experience in Kenya, as you know, we're an agrarian society. A majority of our GDP comes from agriculture. We look at it and we find that the woman in a village setting is the one usually who's tilling the coffee, tilling the tea, even if it's in the sugar plantation, but she's not an owner of that particular piece of land. Very often when the proceeds come from tea or coffee, they don't go into her account, although she's the one who's been struggling day and night. And we want to ask ourselves why. And one of the things that we can bring to the table is even the succession laws. The succession laws do not include her. One, as we said yesterday, she comes from another place, but nevertheless, she's the one who's actually tilling that land. And how can we change that situation? When we then look at, in other areas of trade, very often even that money that she's getting in trade, most of it cannot even go to improve that little business she has, because she's busy spending it on school fees, she's busy spending it on health, her health and that of families, and therefore she's not able to grow. So what I'm trying to say is that even as we look at the economic development of a woman, there's, apart from herself, there's many other actors that have to come in. The community must come in to recognize the work that she's doing. And the other areas that we need to look at, that is proper health, proper education from her children, proper housing, have to actually be factored into that particular equation. In Kenya, what has happened is that over the years, starting from the late 50s, self-help groups took root in this country. And initially, the reason why they took root is because there was no other, a woman could not at that time probably go into a legal company. She didn't have assets, claim to assets. And therefore, what happened is that a self-help group looked like a harmless unit that a woman could engage in and begin and improve her lot. And the initial activities that they did were actually buying plates for each other, etc. But over the years, they've actually grown from that. Women started now buying assets for each other, maybe buying, domestic work, domestic animals, cows, etc., for each other. And they've actually progressed with the advent of, organizations like women organizations here. They've now been able to formalize and to legalize that particular unit, making it a unit where you can take to the bank. It hasn't reached the level where we would want it to, but at least it's actually developed. What am I really trying to say here? I'm trying to say that this particular unit that began as a grassroots movement has an ability to actually be transformed into a real economic powerhouse. In my experience as financing, as you said, through Jitagame, and even through my current position as a chair of Women Enterprise Fund, what we have found throughout the country in Kenya is that women groups, self-help groups that have evolved, some of them have become SACCOs, where women now have control of their resources. They've been able to buy assets. And because they've been able to buy assets, they now have a negotiating position within that particular society. Again, going back to the village situation, you will know that when a meeting is called, if you're not a landowner, if you don't own a cow, or you don't own anything, you will not be called to the table. Therefore, when the opportunities are being discussed, you're not there. Usually, if you find women are called when there's a huge baraza or public meeting to be informed of the decision that has been made. And therefore, the fact that women now, through self-help groups, have been able to become a force, in that community because of owning some asset, because of working collectively together. They are now being recognized, particularly at the political forum. No self-respecting politician will get anywhere unless he consults the women in that particular area. But having said that, we would like to see women use it more in their everyday life, not just as a political force, but how can they improve themselves even more? In other words, how can you begin to negotiate in your community that that hospital that is there must have better maternal care? How can you begin to negotiate that in the market space, they have to make sure that they allocate decent space, and space according to the woman, not according to a man. In other words, space that will ensure that you can look after your children in that setting. And it's only because you are an economic force that you will be able to actually be on the table. I think it's important for us to recognize that economy, resources are critical to the fight for women being on the table. And and by the way, no one will give them to you. It's true that we fight for them and we may get support from the state to get to a certain level, but at the end of the day, it is us as women who have to recognize that we are equal, and therefore we should actually take them. One of the fights that we have as we go around the table is trying to convince women that you are an equal development partner. The fact that you're giving this money is not because it's not out of goodwill or because anybody's feeling sorry for you. It's because you're an equal development partner. And I think with that change in consciousness, you will find that a woman will actually be able to come together. The other thing that I like to say is the self-help group, what we envisage and we hope will happen in Kenya, is that it will become an investment arm. It was started by women, maybe who are now coming to an age of retirement. But what is to stop them investing in their daughters who are educated, and helping them to set up other more powerful economic entities that will be able to do a lot more than just own assets. They'll be able to have a voice to talk about all the other issues that are important to women, which a man will not be able to appreciate as much. Having said that, also, I'd also like to say that I really believe that all these things must be done within the context of a community, because we live and we work with men. Unless they also change their consciousness, I always say that women then are talking to themselves. We have to ensure that our sons, our brothers, our husbands also see us differently. And I like to believe that with the work and the power that a self-help group actually has, that it actually becomes possible. And we have seen that it has become possible in Kenya. Through the Women Enterprise Fund, we've been able in the last 2 years to transform these self-help groups into powerful legal entities who are controlling the lending of money to women and ensuring that that assets in a community are actually being formed. So I think with those few comments, I don't know whether I'm in time. Maybe we can leave it to debate and then we can move on from there. And of course, I'm hoping my Kenyan sisters here who understand that context very well will be able to, of course, comment on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. You actually had some more time, but I can't pass you a note, like physically. So so I didn't know what to do, and I didn't want to, break your line of thoughts. You actually do have more time because each speaker has 25 minutes, and you had about 5 minutes more. So if there is something you really want to say,
actually, why don't we probably give space to some of the other very powerful women on this table who are also involved in business organizations for women, just to build up on the points that I've raised here.
Thank you, Anne, for donating some time to me. My name is Gloria. I come from the support side of women entrepreneurship development. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be on this table. And one of the things that I'd like to probably underscore what Anne was talking about is how do we begin to think economics beyond the gender constructs? And in this, I feel that the challenges of women entrepreneurs can be attributed to societal gender constructs. Because the issues of access to finance, where are they coming from? We find that in Kenya, they are all attributed to probably some laws that were enacted to enhance the male gender in terms of what they had to own it, traditionally. You find that the land was given to the male heads, and ever since then, the issue of land and property right has been connected with the male gender. Therefore, meaning that when our banking policy was also constructed, then they had this issue of all loans must have a collateral. And then the number of women in this country probably who owned land and property have been always less than 2%. So are we saying that women are not contributors to economic development, much as we say that they constitute 48% of women who are in the informal sector? In our population, they actually get almost to 51%. Yet, when it comes to access to resources, they are less than 2%. So we are saying that when we talk about entrepreneurship, it becomes a cultural model of masculinity. And the women must start thinking beyond that. We must go above. Because the issues of business around starting a business, opportunities taking perception, managing a business, risk taking, and innovation. So are women able to do innovation in business, which is needed so much? Do we have that time for innovation? Do we have the clear mind as individuals to get to innovation? How are we managing our businesses? How are we uptaking market outlets and market access? Are we able to go into a golf club and probably join the male gender to see where the business opportunities are? Are we uptaking business information? Are we reading enough materials that provide the same? We have a lot of goodwill from the government. We have now almost 3 funds that support either young women or Women Enterprise Fund, Uwezo, and the Youth Fund. But do the biggest population of our women even know how to access these funds? The issue of information. Again, when we talk about a patriarchal society, do these women have an opportunity to probably go to the market areas like the male gender to get what is current? So all these things for me surround the issue of women not being able to participate in entrepreneurship like the male gender. Then we have, even when we talk about the land and property rights, we have then what translated to the commercial cash crops, the coffee, the tea, the cotton, the pyrethrum. Land belonging to the male head then therefore meant that the cash crops belonged to the male gender as well. And for a very long time then the women were kicked to the side to actually just participate in subsistence farming. So what are we going to tell our female, our female gender? Do they actually join into that commercial cash crops area and increase the conflicts that are around that area of production? Or do we encourage them probably to come from the non-traditional methods of making money and participate in an area where probably they will not have so much conflict, but still participate in income generating activities? And I am saying that women can still engage in areas, and especially the new areas, probably the areas of green jobs. These areas are wide and they are upcoming, and I'm sure there is potential in that. There could be a lot of hazy information around the green jobs, but we can see that that is where the world is going. Ecotourism, aqua business, organic farming. Instead of keeping cows where probably we will have more conflict with the male gender, the women can engage in rabbit keeping, beekeeping, etc. And they can actually take us all the way to export level. Then the issue of skills upgrading, because the same patriarchal issues have ensured that women have very high illiteracy levels. How do women get into skills upgrading so that they can engage in value-adding jobs? So these are areas probably from the support point of view that we need to support women to build their capacity so that they can engage in income generating activities. And probably in tougher areas like construction, mining, and oil industries, then probably our women will not be able to get there as individuals. So maybe we emphasize the issue of the collective dimension, whereby we can build social enterprises around that area and be able to participate in some of those hard areas together. And if I link now to access to finance, then as Anne has said, the self-help group is a good area. We probably move it a notch higher and make sure that the registration of the self-help groups can hold us more accountable. And I'm happy to note that they are doing a good job in getting into the cooperatives side. And this could be in terms of service and credit, as well as marketing cooperatives and housing cooperatives. Women can still get to this road and make much more money, and without a lot of socio-cultural conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that input. Very valuable points you made there about what it means to confront patriarchal views around property, inheritance, patriarchal systems in banking systems, and to confront that, or we confront it and create wealth in alternative areas that are not masculinated, if I can put it that way. They're not zones of power for people who aspire to certain dominant masculine norms of wealth accumulation. So we do that. We work outside the mining and the oil, the places dominated by men, but we also confront those in a collective way. I think that's a very interesting way, and get into the big money as well, and create big money elsewhere too. In both ways, confronting patriarchal norms around property, wealth, inheritance, and economic empowerment. So there we have it. We have two presentations. One by Wilhelmina on really an aspect of the informal economy that is huge for women, huge. All of us do care work. Some of us are paid for it, paid badly, and it's an informal sector that the mainstream government economy, the way economy is talked about, doesn't see. It's not valued. And then we have this input from Kenya around how do we actually work with financial systems, transform them, work outside them, work inside, and shift lived realities of African women. So let me hear from Nigeria. Actually, I think I would like to start with Nigeria. Since we only had two presentations, we have about 45 minutes for question and conversation. So over to our Nigerian sisters. Any additions, questions?
I just have one question about people's access to information. I've always had this discussion with people around me, and I guess it's a big issue here in Nigeria, about so many opportunities out there for women, especially women at lower levels, on access to stuff that can help them. But what is it exactly that we're doing wrong, and how can we fix it? Because I guess from people who work at the back end in microfinancing, it's easier for you to see what's not really clicking and what we can do, especially from the side of civil society, to help you do what you need to do.
Yeah, in fact, one of the areas that I left out deliberately because I was hoping it will come up just a little bit later is actually the issue of microfinance. Now, I think we all recognize that microfinance has done a tremendous amount, not only in Kenya but in Africa, in ensuring that we bring women who are poor women into the economy in terms of enabling them, one, to borrow, to hold accounts, and to be able to transact and improve their livelihoods. Having said that, though, as you know, they're organized in self-help groups, and the amounts that they borrow are small amounts. So again, the elephant, as I called it, in the room of poverty comes onto the table. And the real challenge is, how do you get women in microfinance groups to move to the next level? I think that's where we're talking about new spaces, new strategies, how can they move to the next level? And when you talk about information and where civil society can come in, I think the role for civil society is in education, in ensuring that women are educated in terms of what they can ask for within their communities. Yesterday, when we had a chat by Shireen, she mentioned the Nordic countries and the fact that they were able to rate high on their GDI score because they had healthcare, they had childcare, they were freer to do some of the other things that they were able to do. What I find with our average women is that they're almost overburdened with the kind of responsibilities that they have, for their children, for their animals, etc. So they're not able to. So I think it's just trying to ensure, number one, they have enough information to bargain for actually a better balance in their communities with their menfolk, and therefore, really, as we keep saying, is to try and bring down, challenge the patriarchal society that actually works to limiting the kind of information they can because of the activities that they're doing.
Yes, thank you for that addition, Anne. I mean, talking about information, I've been reminded that we need to link in with the online question and conversation, and we have somebody in Kenya checking Twitter. Could we hear what it is our listeners, virtual listeners, are saying online?
Okay, thank you for this. So I have two questions for the two speakers from different people online. One is from a lady called Amina, and she says gender-biased economy is detrimental to women empowerment. How can states capture and positively engage in formal economy by women? I guess that question goes to Wilhelmina Trout. Then the second question is for Anne Mutahi, and it's about the Women Enterprise Fund. The question is, how many women know about it? So it's just a question of information. What has been done to enable women to access this fund and benefit from this fund? Yeah, so the question was, how can states capture and positively engage in formal economy by women?
So Wilhelmina just wants to check in on the question again.
Yeah, so the question is about the informal economy. So word for word, she asks, how can states capture and positively engage in formal economy by women? So I guess the person asking the question is, since most of the people in the informal economy that you talked about are women, how can the states positively engage them?
Well, just our experience in South Africa, as I said, I'm speaking about the domestic workers sector. We are organized in a trade union, and so through the structures within the trade union, we engage with our Department of Labor, and through the Department of Labor, we have what we call a domestic workers portfolio committee, a committee where labor, business, and the trade union, our trade union, but also civil society organizations, even academic departments of universities who actually do research around domestic work, and other social movements or NGOs who work with domestic workers, maybe just doing research, not necessarily organizing them, come together, and we actually have on the agenda talking about how can we enforce the legislation, how do we go about just monitoring it. And so common problems that we find in the domestic workers sector, we discuss that. Also, the Department of Labor, they employ inspectors who go about knocking on doors of private households and to find out if they are implementing the legislation. Have they registered the domestic worker? Is there a contract signed between the two parties, etc.? So I hope I'm just speaking on behalf of South Africa, but I do know that that many countries actually do, in some form, challenge or interact with the various state departments dealing with the laws or the labor sector in their countries. Just one other thing I wanted to add here. When I spoke about, for example, what for me was the challenges for the domestic workers, and I know I spoke a lot about the amazing laws that South Africa has, but for us that is just but one step. Legislation is but just one step. So it cannot stop there. I mean, just having good laws, and like I said, we have this interaction with our department, but it cannot stop there. There are other fights or the struggles that the domestic workers would have to conduct on another level, just not trying to, across the table, speak with the state, the relevant state departments.
Thank you, Wilhelmina. I need to check in with my colleagues here in the room for questions, comments, before we move back to Kenya. Yes, we have one there. Anyone else? Binola, fantastic, and Rutendo. So we have three, and then we move to Anne, and we'll come back to Wilhelmina. Is that one working?
Yes. Okay. I'm Leila. I'm director of this office of the Heinrich Böll Foundation. I just had one addition to Wilhelmina and your very interesting talk, just because I came from Lebanon 1 year ago to South Africa, where I worked and lived, where almost every, not only middle class and upper class, but now even lower middle class household has a domestic worker. There used to be women from Asia, now they're being replaced by women from Africa, because they work for even cheaper than the Asian women did. And the work conditions are often very dire. I mean, they're locked up in the houses, their passports are being taken away. They work not only for very cheap, but they don't have free days, etc., etc., etc. And I think that we should acknowledge this contribution of African women to economies here, working from outside, where they're not even protected by any legal, I mean, yeah, I don't think they come from South Africa, mostly from Ethiopia and other countries, but where there are some legal frameworks, but they're not protected by them at all. And they're subject to, to legal frameworks that don't acknowledge them at all. And they send this money back home, and their children are being taken care of at home. So sometimes they don't see their own children for 3 years, etc. I think we should just acknowledge the presence of these women and their contribution to the economy, and how African countries should also contribute to protect them by information about the places where they're going, the work conditions there, etc., etc. And the other question I had is to Nigeria. It's actually a pity to not have a contribution from Nigeria at all, and I wondered whether those who are in the room could comment at least a little bit about the situation of women in the Nigerian economy, because it's such a growing economy based mainly on oil. Could you maybe just make a few comments on how it's affecting women and whether women are benefiting at all? And if not, then why not?
My name is Ruchendra Patrick. I'm here at HBF. I have two questions. My first one is around the domestic workers. And I just wanted to find that, I mean, I hear all the things that you can put in place in terms of monitoring and ensuring that, domestic workers are registered and they're taken care of. But what I would like to know is it possible, and maybe you can give us an example, to actually get resources for those kind of things? Because in places where you don't have systems, where you don't have someone going to the house and actually asking for the contract, how then do you then protect the domestic worker because they're working in this crazy place where there isn't anything that is looking after them. How do we even get started to start to look after domestic workers? As we know, they are at the bottom of the list, and our governments are not really putting priority in investing that. Is there a way to go around it? People have to organize first, have the money first before you start looking after each other? What has been your experience? So that's my first question. Then my other question is on microfinance, directed to Kenya. I have seen microfinance projects happening in my own country, in Zimbabwe. But my question is there a way to actually monitor how the money is used? Because you have women who are doing amazing things, getting the money, but there is no guarantee that they have the decision-making qualities for that money. So the money goes back home, but it's not the woman who's going to make the decision. How do we ensure that the money that the women make out of the microfinance projects then falls into the hands of women? Is there a way?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for the lovely presentation. I just want to talk about when we say women should enter the economy. It's not just about adding women to the coffee and stir. It's not that. There are quite a few barriers that have been mentioned as well. I'm just thinking maybe some of the other countries can assist. Maybe they have tried out what we have done in South Africa is for the past 20 years. We have these funds, cooler funds and all these funds that's supposed to give microfinance to women. But when women enter the economy, for example, a professional, I leave my 3 children with a child care and I can pay for it, as a professional. But as women entering the economy from a more bottom side, Magdalena's daughter has to use some of her child grant to pay for a child carer to go, get a job or to go stand in the spaza shop. Yeah, so there's that level of barriers to the economy. So I was just wondering how some of the African countries have addressed that. And then also, what are we doing in terms of not just the literacy of women in terms of basic education, but financial and economic literacy as well? Thank you.
Okay, for for the last thing, I just want to say to Wilhelmina has took us back to the time of apartheid when we were domestic. That's why I sang that song. Really, my mother was a kitchen girl and my father was a garden boy. But that made my mother to struggle and died at 101 years, last year only. I can say that I remember the time when we were domestic workers. You have your different plates, enamel plates that you have to eat on. And then they can cut the tin of jam, it's your cup. And it can't stay in the cupboard where their dishes are being put. I can say the Domestic Workers Union have worked hard to bring down those issues, except this, that what Wilhelmina has raised. It didn't qualify the salaries of the domestic workers. Even the employee, is it an employee or an employer? The boss can't give you what he wants to give you. There is a limit of salaries for the domestic workers, and there are the work is not the same. We have to leave our children and stay with other people's children. Sometimes, if you are just like me, we have to roll and say, "Madam, you need me, and I need you." So both of us are gonna fight now. You're gonna do what you want to do to me, because we were fighting for the laws, So the policy decision makers didn't fight for the domestic workers up to where they wanted to be, but we are nearly there. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm so glad you spoke. Okay, we have very, very interesting and important questions for both speakers. I think let's move over to Kenya. Anne, you were very ready to respond to something earlier, and now you have more questions. Then I'd like us to move to Nigeria. I think the question, Leila, you posed is pertinent. Even though we don't have a speaker from Nigeria, could our Nigerian sisters give us your own angle from your everyday experience and perhaps even your reading and research about the oil economy and the broader economy? What is happening in Nigeria in terms of women's access to and resistance to this kind of male-dominated capitalist patriarchal system we're all facing in different ways? Let's start with Anne. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you. Allow me, Chair of the session, to request we take one little comment from the room before Anne takes the question. Is that okay?
Thank you very much. I think getting into discussing the economic sphere is very important. I really don't want to drag that into how that becomes a building block for political sphere, which we shall do tomorrow. But after listening to the context of South Africa and the domestic workers, after listening to Anne in the context of owning of assets, I wondered whether you could also comment about what in Kenya we call the informal sector, which is really where women, when they didn't have the assets, that's a sector they went into. And in terms of development, you know, that's a sector that has really spearheaded this country. So I wondered whether there's the link between microfinance and informal sector, or is it just microfinance and small business, and where you see the women's play in that sector? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I've got 3 questions to answer. One was on the monitoring. The second one, which preceded that, was on the impact of the Women Enterprise Fund in Kenya. And then, of course, the link between the informal sector and women and the economy. Perhaps let me start by saying that in Kenya, maybe there's a new thing that is happening. And that is, for us, when we define a micro enterprise, we look at it from even that woman on the farm. Even if she's on a family farm, whatever activity that she's doing, even though probably the male activity is maybe coffee or tea, usually she's keeping something on the side, be it her chicken, her rabbits, as we said here, you know, whatever it is, some organic farming. We see that as a micro enterprise. That is number one. Secondly, let me say that what our government recognizes is that the growth in this economy will actually come from those micro enterprises, that informal sector, that SME. And there's been a lot of resources actually that have been geared towards this area to actually enable them to grow. I think there was the issue of information, which I'll talk about when we talk about Women Enterprise Fund. So when you look at this particular informal sector, the truth of the matter is that it's dominated by women. They're the ones who are there, and therefore there is a huge opportunity for, number one, the civil society, as I said, for the state actors, to ensure that that woman who is in that particular sector is able to grow and therefore have an impact on the economy. I think that is where our challenge, our dilemma really is how can you change her thinking? How can you change the thinking of the society around her? So I hope that answers your question partly, Rose. Now, there was a question about monitoring and the impact of microfinance. This has been an argument for many, many years. It's true that there's the immediate impact, of course, that a woman who did not have 100,000 shillings now has 100,000 shillings. That has to have an impact of some kind. But what is a lasting impact? And initially, when microfinance started in Kenya, what they'll do is, let's say you have a kiosk, or as I said, you have some cows. They'll come back after 1 year and they'll ask you, so, you know, where are you now? Have you added some more cows? Have you added some more stock? And they found that actually that did not happen. And therefore, they came up with what is called the household index, where they began looking what was the impact on her household. And they found that, oh, her son now went to college, or he went to the training school nearby. Their health is better than it was a year before. Maybe the house is in slightly better shape than it was. And they began to then look at the impact that that money has. And I think that is a space that microfinance is in. And it speaks to what Yelewe was saying earlier, that we also need different monitors as to the impact that we have on the economy, because our uses for our money maybe are not the same as our male counterparts. Nevertheless, we are contributing significantly to the economy of our communities and of our households. Thirdly, I'd like to come to the Women Enterprise Fund, and because we have an audience from South Africa and Nigeria, maybe let me just begin by explaining what it is. The government in 2007 set aside funds, considerable funds, for women, and particularly for women and the growth of their enterprises. And the fund today stands at $34 million, equivalent to about, I think, 3.5 billion Kenya shillings. And it had a very wide mandate, not only to provide finance to women, but also to capacity build them, because we recognize that there's also a need for increased knowledge and change in attitudes. There was also the issue of market access, and we have also worked along that particular mandate, and also improving their products. And we've done a lot in this area in terms of making sure that if a women group are making jam, how can that jam move out of the community and go into a supermarket or go to a wider audience so that they can get a better return for what they're actually doing. The third one, of course, was linking them, because we realized that mentoring is also very, very important for women. So we've also looked at how can we ensure that they are mentored with organizations that can help them get up to the scale they have. You asked what has our impact been? Since we were founded, we've now funded throughout Kenya 1 million, just under 1 million women, about 800,000 women, who are mainly in different groups all over the country. We're in every single constituency. The issue of where you can find us in the constituency, we're always located, number one, in the CDF offices or in the county offices, what is now called county offices in every single county. We have volunteers in every community, and we are still working on ensuring that information about this fund reaches every single corner. It has been a challenge, and it's something that we are continuing to work on. But I'd like to say that I think we've made a tremendous impact, and there have been a lot of impact studies done as to what have we actually done and how has it impacted the economy. So I think, unless there's any other questions, yeah?
Thank you. Before we take it back to South Africa, will you allow us to take an online comment from here? Apparently there's a question online.
This is a question from Karen, and she asks, do corporate boards like the one you sit on consider indices like gender gap or the Human Development Index?
Yes, as you know, in Kenya, the issue of gender balancing, of proportion of the 30% has been key. And it's not only in the government, it's actually moved also to the corporate and the private sector. So in the boards that I do sit on, it is becoming an increasing issue. They have addressed it in a lot of the boards, that you do find that they must get women inside the boards. The issue that I think is still, the milestone we need to reach is, what is the impact of those women on the board? Are they raising the gender issues? Or are they coming to be pseudo men? That's the issue that we have, and that's the issue that we're working towards. There's been a lot of organizations that have begun in Nairobi and throughout the country to ensure that that issue is addressed. And as I had said, even at the village level, it's very, very important that we continue actually teaching women. And I think this is now another arena that is open, to make sure that if they have power in a self-help group, how are they using that power in their community? Are they using it to make sure that women issues are actually raised and they're done in a feminine way?
I'd like I heard the question differently, and I like your answer because you talked about gender balance on corporate boards. I think the question was probably also asking whether corporate boards use these new indices of the economy, such as the Development Index, the Human Development Index, and Gender Empowerment Index, in terms of assessing the economy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I think they, at least the ones that I know of in Nairobi, in Kenya, they do not. And that's probably the next frontier that we need to reach. There's been a lot of argument of, does microfinance ever have an impact on the economy? A lot of the studies that have been there have shown that they don't have any real, impact on the economy. But what we're seeing is that once the women now go to the next level in terms of being more formal, we're starting to see the economy in the community. I want to believe that if you add one community to another, you will get the economy. So I think we need to change the minds of government of how they measure. Definitely, that's an area that women can begin to advocate on. Yeah, I think I'd like to leave it there.
Let's move over to Nigeria. I know that here in South Africa, we have maybe 4 of us might be leaving soon. So I would like to say bye to them before we go. So let us know when transport comes. But in the meantime, let's move to Nai. Are you here? Are they here? The transport is here. So I just want to say that we've got 4 members of our virtual conference space here. Leaving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. South African virtual conferences. Yes, it's the issue of transport in Cape Town. It's still very much racial, historical problem. So we would like to say bye to the 4. I hope we'll see you tomorrow. 5 of you who are leaving today. Are you going to make it tomorrow? Possibly. No. Okay. So thank you very much for coming.
They just want to
come another time. Let's move to Nigeria.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Yeah, and in response to the question about how the oil economy helps women, support women, right? That was the question. I want to say that in general terms, no, the economy has not trickled down to the woman. And you see that from even the Niger Delta. Like, first of all, there is the degradation of the land, which is the mainstay of the rural woman, of the economy, and the mainstay for the woman. That is where she's able to fend for her family, get firewood to feed her home, and that's where she's able to get fish to sell and provide for her family. But the oil exploration efforts have not proved helpful by degrading the land. That's one. And then from the revenue generated, we hear these large sums coming out of Nigeria, revenue generated from sale of oil products, and yet you cannot see how this affects the woman in terms of, again, for instance, we have the Shopee program, which was supposed to take care of the excess funds from the fuel subsidy. Earlier in 2012, there was the removal of the fuel subsidy, which caused protests all over Nigeria. And so the Shopee was set up to ensure that excess funds from oil are used to support women, young people, and other forms of social development projects. But we don't see that. We just hear of figures, we hear of GDPs in the news, and when you go back to the field and you see what is happening, there's no form of development for these women. They're not able to have access, at least to finance, or even say for agriculture, with no particular reference to the Niger Delta now, they're not even able to have access to finance to get fertilizer, for instance. I know this for sure because my parents are farmers, and back in Plateau State, Nigeria, Middle Belt, Central region, the farmers in the village are, when there's fertilizer, it's this whole, there's an economy to it that is not as the government says. If the fertilizer price is, for instance, 20 naira, the local farmer in the village who has no access to finance has to buy this thing at about 30 naira. how is that a trickle-down effect of something you say you're providing funds for to help ameliorate poverty? They are not seeing it. So that is one area I can speak of categorically, that if they say, if the government says their GDP is high and it's coming from revenue, from fuel, we are not seeing it as individuals. No, not even at the middle class level, not to talk of the woman in the rural area. And so that I would say is my opinion. The woman is not benefiting at all from it, regardless of what the media has to say.
So let's move back to, is Wilhelmina back in the room? We haven't had a break actually, as we started with the question and answer session. So Wilhelmina out for a bit, she's back. And there were quite a few questions around domestic work. And I just want to check if you got them. Yes, it was the issue of migrant workers. Leila raised it. Yes, and how the increasing number of migrant workers working as domestic workers in South Africa with zero minus less than zero protection. It's about the issue of their opportunities not knowing they're here and probably working under the radar of immigration. So if you have any comment on that, and then how to look after domestic workers, that was Rutendo's question, because there is very little systems to monitor what is actually going on. So how do we look after each other before waiting for money to put in place systems to monitor? I think the question was along those lines, Rutendo. Those are the ones that I have, and maybe you can add. Yeah.
No, just in terms of of migrant workers, and these are mainly women again. In South Africa, they are covered by the labor laws. Yes, migrant workers. Obviously, there are workers who are not registered, who are not here without papers. Yeah, they obviously are workers that we need to be careful of, because I mean, in terms of the law. But sorry, migrant workers, women from other parts of Africa are protected by our laws. But yet, having said that, there is a situation, and we are confronted with this on a regular basis, that they would employ the women without papers and obviously pay them less money. And as you know, we down here in Cape Town, we haven't seen that many cases, but I've been in the North Johannesburg. We're closer to the rest of Africa. It's easily for those women to get into South Africa. It's happening. And we, as a union, have been encouraging our members to welcome those women, or to, make them feel safe in meeting space, especially because there's competition. I mean, people do feel angry that as if other people are taking their jobs. But they can join the union. We organize them, but we have to be extremely careful, because even as in cases of our legal status, I remember the accountant meeting with us and saying, you need to be very careful, because if you have them on your books, you have to declare that they're illegal, so to speak, and this could be consequences for them. But it is an issue that is on the international level, has been taken up, and it is the protection of migrant workers. And I didn't even touch on, as I said to you, what's happening in the East, especially with domestic workers there. But now that they're organized internationally and they have this convention that, has raised the awareness around domestic workers and their rights and protection for them, I think that the issue of migrant women, domestic workers, are becoming more and more visible. Then I don't know if I hope I'm answering your question correctly, but the one part that I left out in my discussion was that, for me, and I make the distinction, the transformation of the domestic employment, that is a major, I think, struggle and a major challenge for us. I don't see it as a fight just to transpose or transfer existing rights that formal sector workers get, and okay, we domestic workers want the same. I don't think it's just about, it's a fight around that. I think that the process has to be a participatory one. It's going to need the major intervention from all role players, the trade unions, the governments, the employers, other civil society organizations, so that we can, you know, as I spoke, and I speak just for South Africa here, where we have this constitution that, you know, envisages this life for all, a beautiful life for all. So we need to, it's got to have to be a process that that we change patterns of behavior. We have to change the consciousness of employers. We need to transform some, you know, social institutions. And the one thing that I feel, the one challenge is that it's not only about transforming the work of the domestic worker, but how do we also raise that consciousness or that level of consciousness of the domestic worker to believe and to know that freedom and equality and a better life and dignity is something that, you know, that that you're entitled to, you know, that life hasn't put you in this position for you to remain in this position. The comrade who just left here now sitting next to me, the way she hugged me, she said to me, I want to hug you because I know what the life of the domestic worker is. My mother was one, and I lost my mother at a young age because she worked so hard in the kitchen of her employer that her kidneys gave in. And she says this is a good couple of years ago, but I still feel that pain. So, you know, so I think it's a whole transformation of like I say, of the behavior, of our consciousness, of understanding, and for the domestic worker themselves to understand that they have a right to this dignity, they have a right to a decent, to a better life, you know, and I am a long-standing trade unionist, and the one thing I remember as a young trade unionist 40 years ago was that the one thing that stuck to me was that we are fighting to take on, as women, to take control of our own lives, to shape our own destiny. And it's so difficult to get the domestic workers to not to understand, but just to, you know, realize that it's possible for them to do it. They can, you know, step out of that kitchen. So I think organization is actually at the heart of it also. Not necessarily the trade union model of organization, because it's, when I was speaking to Yaya, I was saying it's very patriarchal, the trade union model. And that's what we're fighting with in Satsao, for example. But there are other forms of organization for domestic workers as well. But the one thing is working together, you know, it's important.
Thank you, thank you. I just want to check in with my colleagues here on the Cape Town virtual conference that has shrunk. We are now down to 6, but we are still here. Is there anything else you want to contribute? Claudia? Yes.
Hi, this question is for Wilhelmina. While you may not answer this on behalf of the domestic workers union, but perhaps from your own experience of working in trade unions, what is the role that trade unions can play in ensuring that women, for example, who are in abusive relationships can seek supportive services during working hours? So, for example, we did a lot of work with women obtaining protection orders in courts from domestic violence, and organizing time off was virtually impossible, particularly when, you know, going to apply for a protection order doesn't happen in one day. You may have to go back repeatedly. What is the role the unions can play, and has there been any movement on that front? Is that on the agenda or not?
Okay. Yes, we didn't even touch on you know, violence against women and the abuse, because that's always on the agenda. That's a priority within our organization. It goes along, I mean, with any meeting that we have, that appears. I'm not sure how many of you here in Cape Town have been following the case of the domestic worker who was abused by her employer's partner. And this case is quite interesting because the employer, who is the woman, actually encouraged her domestic worker to lay the charge against her partner, the father of a child. And it went to, it went to our labor court because it was an unfair practice, but it also went to the criminal court. And as a union, we organized the members to actually be there in support and solidarity with this domestic worker at court that day. And this actually profiled the case. The members, the media was very interested in why were you standing and so forth. But for me, looking at the case, I had the feeling, and I open to correction. I'm just my assessment, that I feel that maybe there was an abusive relationship there, and that she herself was unable to speak out, and urged a domestic worker to do it, and she supported her through this process. So it's a very difficult situation to handle, because yes, when women come, they want to speak, but they're not prepared to take that step further, like, let us go for the protection order. So we try to walk with them through the process. It is difficult. It is a union, because of the unique situation in terms of the private household, that we encourage the sort of relationship between employer and employee to be one where we can speak with each other, on the basis of employer and employee. And I can say that there are lots of moves afoot, discussion platforms, workshops, taking women through the process of getting court interdicts and what kind of support we can give. But it is still not at that point where people are coming forward. It's still not at that point. So we have isolated cases, but I think it needs to be highlighted, which was done in this past with the media. Yes, but it's just too many still out there that's still, kept under wraps, still not visible, not known of, not spoken of. But it's a universal phenomenon.
Thank you very much. I think we've now come to the end of our session. It's 5 o'clock South African time. I want to check in with Kenya and Nigeria for any closing comments.
Yes.
I noticed that the question about household decision-making shifts was answered by Anne, and her response was the household index as a new way of measuring shift in household dynamics. And I was wondering if that index somehow also has a way of measuring shifts in decision-making power. That would be interesting. I was wondering what kind of index that would be if it was measuring that, and how was it doing it. But we may not have time to answer it. I just want to check in with Kenya, check in with Nigeria, and we're done. Yes, over to Kenya.
Thank you very much, Chair. Allow us to just make that last comment, especially regarding what you've just asked, regarding whether power relations within the home actually change, given the changes in the homes, the indices that are measuring households. Allow Wahu Kara to pick that ending remark, on behalf and in conclusion, rather raising up from where Anne Mutahi left off. Thank you.
Actually, yes. And I just build up on what Anne brilliantly presented, and especially when she talked about transformation within community context. That is the indicators of the household showing that society needs to transform, and transformation must be on the economic basis, because economics is what drives society, and it has been driven within the patriarchy arrangement, and that patriarchy arrangement is being sort of now challenged. So the question of women taking the lead is not by accident, and they have just got to be given the space. That is what we are talking about, informal economy. Informal economy is in the hands of women. That's why even microfinancing had to be located by the international financial big wigs to be able to bring that energy to see whether they can revamp the banking industry. It's a fact, and the researches are done. So for the ending up this discussion, it is that we should strategize more within the economic sphere in challenging patriarchy. And like Anne put it very brilliantly, by going to the community to transform the consciousness in order to bring on board the decision-making location for those who are the energy of society in economics. And it is the women. The informal economy is the unpaid labor that we have been discussing in all this discussion. And the principle of self-help grouping, and I like the way you put it, in the 60s, it is an energy that emerged from Kenya because of our history. And it is an energy of what I would call of gift economy, solidarity economy, which is a life economy, which is very feminine. And that cannot be taken away from the women. So the question of decision-making space is what now we should be able to occupy through the kind of work you are, Anne and others are doing in entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship to bring the creativity and innovation of women as they sustain life. Because the question of the 21st century is whether the economics will be serving life or a profit. The women's economy serves life. The men's economy serves profit, with the wars and with everything else that goes with it. So for this discussion, I think we have set the ground that we are really going to challenge patriarchy within the economic sphere, consolidating the struggles of women and locating the energy of women in the innovation and creativity that they have shown throughout history and have demonstrated in occupying the space of informal economy, which, like Anne put it very rightly, it is the genesis of microfinance. And I like the way she said that microfinance is the route to engage with the patriarchy. So if we become very strategic, and I would really want to encourage ourselves to do so, we will give the alternative economics imagination, that of excluded people, so to speak, women, but they have to live, and therefore they have come up with their alternative economics. And that's why somebody who asked if on online asked, what is the government trying to do on informal economy? And our government is ahead. There is the Uwezo Fund, the Youth Fund, all this. And I've listened to the president and his deputy and any other person talking for government. They are talking on how can money be put in the pockets where it has not been. We are coming with another definition now as women. We want that money, as it goes into the pocket, it serves the sustenance of life. The assets the women will engage in investment will be assets that connect with life. Health industry, food industry, education industry, and I can go on, and it's on record. The 21st century is a century of social investment, social industries. The greatest architects are women, and the wonderful workers are women. We have it.
Thank you so much. That's it from Kenya. Thank you.
Fantastic. That is a fantastic summary of the significance of challenging patriarchy in the economic sphere, alternative economies, social investments that women are great architects of. Let's hear from Nigeria.
Yeah, just to say thank you for sharing your experiences and for all the inputs, and we look forward to continuing the conversation online on Twitter. Thank you.